Hi, Sebastian. How are you?
Good, sleep deprived, as I always am at the moment. But other than that, good. Caffeinated, so ready for
That's
this
great.
episode. And
Yeah.
we're trying something a bit different today. So maybe we can say from the get go, if you in the audience have feedback or you liked it or you didn't like it, let us know. We thought that we go back to having just check-ins to see what's on our mind and what we're working on. So we don't really know what the other person wants to talk about. And yeah, curious to see how this goes.
Yeah, because we've previously done plenty of episodes, just the two of us, but they have always been with a planned topic at hand. And we felt like, given that there's so much happening all the time, and sometimes it's kind of bits and pieces, it would be cool to just do a bit of brainstorming around topics that are top of mind today. So, what is top of mind, Sebastian? Where shall we
Got
start?
some topics that I'm almost certain you're also thinking about, and I've got some topics that I'm almost certain you definitely do not have on your list.
Oh, okay.
But let's start with the more obvious ones because I think they're on most people's minds. I would like to start with the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. We already did a show with Dan Maleski that we're going to link in the show notes following last December's there was one sentence in a commission proposal. It opened the door towards the potential use of carbon removals in the CBAM. We did a show with Dan. It was super interesting. But then now in March, the Council of Europe, the member states, they essentially came forward with a position where they reaffirmed this, as far as I understand, and they said we should really explore the use of Article 6 credits in
Wait,
the CBAM.
are we that far? So, first of all, I'm quite sure it was Article 6 and it wasn't removal specifically. Um, but what I saw in the news was a leaked document around which member states were having a conversation, but I wasn't aware that they had adopted already a joint position on this.
You are probably right. Like what I think happened a lot on social media was that people were like, European Union accepts Article 6 credits and this was actually not me this time, in the CBAM, but that's not actually where we're at, right? Like there's a commission proposal. They are the member states and the parliament deliberating. And apparently, from what you say, there's been a leak about the council's position.
Yeah,
So should we dig
because the,
into it?
because
Yeah.
the reality is that all these processes are not public, but stuff leaks, and hence you kind of get the feel around what your conversations are happening, but it doesn't necessarily give you the positions of each and every country and so on. So, I mean, what do you think about it? You tend to be always much more optimistic than I am. So I'm expecting to hear how this will save CDR, will it?
I honestly, I have a lot of questions. And that's why I was excited to talk to you because I am optimistic about CDR and the CBAM. I'm a perennial optimist, but there's a lot of things that I think are a bit misaligned or don't fully make sense to me yet. And I was hoping that maybe you have the answers. So one example here is, as far as I understand, the CBAM follows the ETS. Right. And so it sounds a bit strange to me that we would potentially make rules for the CBAM before we've made rules for the revision of the ETS, for which we have a proposal only mid this year. It will take a year or two until we actually finalize that. So in my head, we were never going to see such a big decision taken before we know where carbon removals exactly end up in the ETS. So maybe starting there, like what's your read on, I guess, the sequencing of CBAM versus ETS?
Well, sequences is one thing that plays out weirdly in many fronts these days. I mean, it's the same thing when it comes to the MSR, right? Where we where we have now something out there that's like why do we have it just a few months before everything
That's
else
true.
comes? I think some of it happens for political reasons. Um, I, I I mean, because the sequencing, it is what it is, right? It's where the processes are. What confuses me is like if the plan with the CBAM was to make countries establish carbon price, ideally, their own carbon tax or ETSs, which cover, broad economic sectors, and through that have a lot of impact like if suddenly now there's an opportunity to use international credits instead of that, like what does this mean in the context of the actual impact of CBAM around the world? We know many other jurisdictions that are considering their own CBAMs, but for me, it is strange. And then there's this whole thing of the actual potential demand from CBAM and the lack of transparency when it comes to the prices of Article 6 credits, which could be, maliciously inflated, or, basically you could even have just the demand and supply creating all kinds of numbers there. And does that reflect the actual climate impacts?
And is this because when we say Article 6, again, there's a big difference between 6.2 and 6.4 in this context, right? But at the moment, it's not specified at all. So it could be 6.2 credits, right?
And could be either, right? As it's not specified.
Yeah, because then we lose track even more of, a standardized quality assurance if it's 6.2. And that's the other thing that I find that I can't really wrap my head around. So the idea of the CBAM was, as you said, to create an incentive to have carbon pricing systems around the world. And that's really working, right? Like we're seeing dozens and dozens of countries doing that. But would these Article 6 credits be domestic or from outside of the jurisdiction that would be using them? That's the other thing I haven't fully understood.
It's not clear from these conversations. But when it comes to sequencing, what I think is somewhat strange as well is the fact that we are yet to find out which types of Article 6 credits the EU will allow to be used against its 2040 targets. And we're expecting there to be I would expect quite elaborate rules on what is actually going to be acceptable. Logically, it should be similar to what will be also allowed for the CBAM.
But it's a different use case, right? Because for me, the Article 6 credits the international credits under 2040 could be used for all sorts of things, whereas CBAM really mirrors the ETS, right? So for me, there could be a slightly different standard, but the CBAM would have to mirror what is allowed in the ETS.
So a different standard in terms of it should be more specific to the ETS sectors, or
take nature removals, for example. In the 2040 international credits, you might have some nature-based removals that are used to compensate some, I don't know, LULUCF emissions, for example. But that might not work for the CBAM because the CBAM is really about heavy industry and industrial emissions, right? So that's where I'm thinking there could be different standards potentially.
But if you look at what the majority of Article 6 credits are today, these are solar energy, these are energy efficiency all around. Like these are these type of credits. Even the forestry credits are a very small percentage of it.
I'm thinking ahead a little bit, like what it would look like in 5-10 years. Hopefully we would have more removals in there, right?
It will change if there is a push to change. Otherwise, it's going to be the easiest things will be done first.
And maybe it doesn't matter for the CBAM, right? Because if we come at it from a carbon accounting perspective, then obviously we want to make sure that essentially the same credits that are allowed in the ETS are the ones used in the CBAM. But from our chat with Dan Milewski, really what it comes down to is more the financial equivalency, right? The trading fairness. And when it comes to trading fairness, it doesn't matter so much whether that's reduction credits, 5 reduction credits or 1 removal credit, right? So I'm wondering if maybe for the CBAM, because of that, it actually doesn't matter so much if it's the same as we allow in the ETS domestically.
I think a lot on the CBAM, as my impression, is really this math between the EU allowance price and that the same value is going to be paid for the CBAM liability.
Exactly. Yeah.
And what exactly, obviously we would want to make sure that if international credits are used there, they are high integrity credits. Now, if we would be requiring removal credits that are similar to what we expect to see in the ETS in the coming future. That would be DACs and BiCCS credits. Well, those are going to be way beyond the price of the EU allowance, so no one would buy them also for CBAM purposes, right?
And there might actually also be no supply for those, or very little, right, outside of
Furthermore,
Europe. Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of conversation about international credits that keeps forgetting that it's quite a bit more demand than there is supply today, and the supply constraints will stay on for quite some time, and corresponding adjustments. It's not going to be easy just to create huge flows of international credits out of Article 6. Because
but this is what I don't get. This is where I'm getting stuck on it. Let's take, I don't know, Brazil, right? If you have a Brazilian steel producer who's exporting to Europe, my understanding is they would buy domestic credits.
But if it's domestic, it's not Article 6.
Exactly. But this is what I don't understand. Like, why if you allow credits, doesn't it make sense for them to be domestic? Like, why would Brazil import credits from another country to reduce then its liabilities for its CBAM exporters?
Only if it's cheaper, right?
But you would want to allow also domestic use, right? This is where I actually started.
Yeah, but that's where national emission trading systems, national carbon taxes, like that was the whole plan.
Yeah.
And because there's this hope that Article 6 credits will come and they will make life easier and cheaper. I mean, that's the whole conversation around the EU's 2040 target and the fact that 5% of international credits will be allowed to be used, or up to 5% against it. And but if you look at the price range of credits, I mean, Switzerland today has been buying for, I think, an average of 32 euros per ton. It's not that cheap.
And that's reduction credits, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If not all, then at least large majority of them. And if you then account for inflation and look into the future, we are looking at some serious numbers. I think there's quite a bit that we can do cheaper, even ourselves here in Europe, when it comes to reduction.
Interesting. So maybe, I mean, that's a springboard into, we've spent now almost a third of the time on CBAM. Should we move to another topic? I'm wondering, we can talk about international credits, but whatever else you had on your agenda, what's your topic that you wanted to talk about?
The one that I wanted to bring up is something I recently posted about also on LinkedIn. Carbon Gap prepared a calculator how to actually see the price of the potential price of international credits and all the different considerations around it. Some of the feedback was, well, of course, these numbers seem high because some of the assumptions here look at novel removals, and those are always going to be expensive and so on. But in practice, it's tricky because, first of all, if you look at how many credits the EU would want to buy, these are big numbers. These are hundreds of millions of tons potentially. Those don't just lay around so that you can go and buy them on the spot markets. You have to literally build up a funnel of projects together with different countries, and these countries will have to be able to supply those credits while still being able to achieve their own NDCs. They might want to actually use some of the mitigation outcomes from these credits towards their own NDCs, which means that maybe we are paying for only 50% of the emission reductions, and the rest of the other 50 stays in the host country. What I didn't notice, and Louise from Carbon Gap pointed out in LinkedIn comments, was what the Commission is considering if you look at the current ongoing public consultation, where they're literally asking people, like, so what proportion of these mitigation outcomes should be left to benefit for the partnering country? And the option is like everything should go to the EU, or then less than 50% should stay in the partner country, or more than 50% or 50. I mean, 50% is a big number, and if these are being considered like as an actual option on the table, we are not looking at 10%, which some of the host countries have established. The EU might seem to be quite generous. I don't know what it means in practice, but it just shows that there's so many aspects here. I'm not even talking about the percentages that go under 6.4 for the shares of proceeds or adaptation funds. There are so many different haircuts on these transactions. And this one thing that seemed to be a simple, cheap way out might actually become way more expensive in practice than it was originally foreseen.
Super interesting. So it was kind of used as we can just do it cheaper outside, but now what you're saying is it might actually be expensive, and the supply might actually, there's a lot of questions around the supply.
Yes,
and the
also
domestic use.
If you talk to some of the buyer countries, they're saying that it's actually very, very difficult to get the deal done with the host countries, because it's way more easier to buy in terms of the infrastructure you have to have in place in a country compared to when you're selling, and the infrastructure you have to have place in for that, for
buying
developing.
is easier than selling, you're saying?
Exactly, because to sell you have to have all this domestic framework in place, how you are building the projects, how you're approving them, like how the whole process works. And that is difficult to build out, and especially if you look at who these countries are, it's even more difficult to build out in those countries because these don't tend to be developed countries.
Like, where I think this is going to go from my vantage point is it's going to be quite difficult to do for smaller countries. Like, I can imagine Brazil, India, China, I don't know, like Kenya, maybe, like the countries that see a big market, a big opportunity, they might invest in this infrastructure. But this might really penalize smaller countries, right? Because what you're saying is there's kind of this overhead that you need to put in place, irrespectively of whether you're selling from one project or from 100 projects, probably, that is quite difficult to do at present.
Definitely, larger countries have an edge there, but my impression is also it really depends which countries already have experience from the past and who have people that have the right connections, potentially, getting in some financial streams that can be used to put these policy frameworks in place, basically. Because if you have good connections, if you can actually fund it, and you have good consultants helping to build it up, it doesn't matter the size of your country. It's like how well connected you are in this space and how you can make it work for you.
But it sounds like a solvable problem, right? Because the whole 2040 credits discussion, like the price thing, I think is a stickier discussion. But this one, we've got time, right? Like, it's not like we want to buy these credits in 2028. We're saying like pilot phase 2031, but really 2036.
There's also competition, right? There's CORSIA. I mean, obviously they also rely on voluntary market credits, but also Article 6 credits, I would expect to play a role. Then there are other countries buying credits through Article 6 for their own indices, and they will keep looking for that. And there is the challenge around corresponding adjustments, where countries can't just sell endlessly different credits, because if they sell it through Article 6, they typically need to adjust their inventory, and it makes it more difficult for them to achieve their climate targets. So it is tricky. It's a very different situation compared to what we had during Kyoto Protocol.
To be honest, it sounds like a huge mess, like a huge opportunity for shady accounting, for all sorts of stuff. So I'm curious where we're going to end up. But if there's so much demand and so much money to be made potentially from this,
I think the biggest challenge is the fragmentation, but it came with a bottom-up structure of Paris Agreement, and there is no way around that now. There's no way back, and which means like every country has their own processes, systems, frameworks, and you need to work with that. And it is kind of crazy, but it's the reality. I was hoping that we would have, groups of countries emerge that use something that is very much the same, but everyone wants to decide for themselves, right? What kind of haircuts they take on credits and so on. If you can't if you can't decide for yourself, why not?
So messy. Like if I think about from these 20 minutes, we didn't even talk much about ETS, only on the side, right? But we've got the whole international credits discussion. There's a consultation right now. There's going to be an impact assessment by the end of the year, right? So this is going to take a while. In parallel, we've got the whole CBAM discussion, where again, trilogue hasn't started, but it's also happening at the same time. And then we have the ETS revision. And all of those are kind of really connected, but happening in parallel. So I'm really curious what we're going to see come out of this.
So what do you want to see come out of the ETS revision? Well, what do you think will come out of it? Like, I can imagine already what you would want to see, but what do you think will come out of it?
I mean, I don't know if you saw today, a negative emissions platform, which I recently joined as well as a board member, launched an ETS Needs Removals campaign. And they've got kind of 7 principles, I guess, that they are suggesting. We're seeing a lot of kind of momentum building now around this topic. I mean, the direction we seem to be heading is that CDR integration looks pretty likely. It looks like it's going to be DACs and BiCCS only. Again, I have my opinions on this, right?
But then why the campaign? Because in my view, it was also obvious that we'll have DACs and BiCCS in. So why the campaign?
Yeah. I guess it's a good opportunity to position a bunch of messages. For example, one of the key messages is that we really need to think about financing the price gap, especially for DACs and BiCCS through ETS revenues, right? We really need to think about a dedicated 2040 target for removals. Like, it's an opportunity to show that integration on its own is not sufficient. We need to think about all these other pillars around it, right? So that's kind of my takeaway, and I like what was put forth there.
I would have done a campaign on how to tackle the price gap.
That's honestly for me that's the biggest question I have. And that's why I also keep relentlessly advocating for a more tech neutral approach, because I think we need to have a lower cost portfolio. Otherwise, this is a non-starter, right? What's your view of how we can bridge a pretty big price gap?
There is one idea circling. I don't think it will materialize, and I don't think it will have legs eventually. Is that, well, we should just have a requirement to buy a percentage of your allowances as removals. Full stop.
That would drive up cost, and in the current political environment, that's a non-starter.
Yeah, but that's the way around the whole price gap discussion, because then that doesn't matter. But then the problem is that only the cheapest solutions will actually, or the cheapest projects can actually get anything sold.
Yeah, I think it's super good. Like, this whole price gap for me is just, that's the biggest question. And
but we have solutions for that for other projects, so it's not insurmountable, right?
You mean like domestic, I don't know, carbon contracts for different stuff like that? Or... But somebody has to put the money on the table, right? And it's currently a lot of money.
And on any problem you see, everyone is relying on the ETS funds to solve it. Whether it's the price gap here or like anything else I keep hearing about, everyone is relying. But like, that's where the big pile of money is. So we need to find a way into that. And there is a challenge of obviously member states being used to use their auctioning revenues largely as they see fit. And the more people kind of try to grab into those financial flows, the trickier it gets.
What I'm doing right now, I mean, quick teaser with my my peer, Rafael Cario. We're currently working on a paper with the American University on front-loading ETS revenues for carbon removals and what that would mean. And basically, what difference does it make if we invest money from the ETS into carbon removals in 2028 versus 2034 versus 2039? But bottom line is we need to do it sooner rather than later because the consequences accumulate.
I guess that's the situation for almost any decarbonization solution. Like, we need it today, not tomorrow.
Yes.
But looking forward to seeing what she will put out there.
But yeah, we've got 5 minutes left. I want to bring in a couple of wild cards. You can choose.
Okay.
AI or Iran war?
I don't know. AI?
Okay, because for me, these are two massive developments that are happening in the world, which have first and second degree repercussions on carbon removal, in my view. And I mean, AI is, for me, it's such an interesting one. And I don't see a lot of conversation on it regarding carbon removals. There's the obvious one that the companies that are building AI are currently some of the biggest buyers of carbon removal. They are some of, the US big tech companies. Their emissions are going up double, at times triple digit as a result. And it's kind of it's an arms race. So they're just going as fast as they can. So there's that dynamic. And there's another dynamic, which I find super interesting, where we are building out unprecedented amounts of energy infrastructure for these data centers. And if everything works out, AI is going to use that energy. If at any point in my head, at any point, the AI proves out to be a hype and we have to scale down for whatever reasons, there's a million reasons, we have all this energy infrastructure that could be used for other things. For example, DACs, right? So I'm thinking, what are the potential, again, first and second degree implications for carbon removals of the current AI boom? Wondering, I'm not sure you've done any thinking on this, but if you have, or if you have an opinion, I'm curious to hear what your take is.
One thing I've noticed is that if in previous years in sustainability conferences, carbon removal got quite a bit of focus, now these days, like everything circles around AI. And because of the energy needs there, and obviously the emissions will be driven up. I mean, the obvious consequence will be that the more we keep emitting, the more removals we will be needing eventually. But I think there's also something that came up in our conversation with Jennifer Wilcox is like whether there is a way to already integrate removals into some of these whether when building data centers or when building out different types of energy infrastructure.
Then after that episode, we had a DAX CEO reach out to us and tell us that is basically a non-starter, that idea.
But the question is like, are there other ways where we could bring these things together? And if there are, also our listeners, if you know, let us know, because we'd be happy to spread word about it.
Yeah, and also if any, I'd love at some point to do an episode on AI and CDR, because there's so many links. There's also AI used to develop CDR and optimize, right? I didn't even touch on that.
Yeah.
Right now, there's just the obvious emission situation. And for me, the much more interesting one is the energy question, because I think what AI is leading us towards is we're pushing so hard to lower the cost of energy and to build out energy infrastructure. And that is exactly what we need for direct air capture, right? So I can just see how at some point those two worlds might intersect because of that. But yeah, for now, it's a lot of gas turbines in the US, so I'm not sure that's helping us. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not going to be something immediate, but it takes a lot of patience and perseverance to keep pushing carbon removal these days because of everything else that's happening, the geopolitical situation, the growing energy needs. The focus is just everywhere else, but meanwhile, there is no net zero without removals, and there is no net negative without removals. So we just need to get all of this built out at the same time.
And just keep taking the next step. That's all we can do right now.
One step at a time, or one policy proposal at a time.
Excellent. Well, we definitely don't have time for my other wildcard topic that will take more than a minute.
It's for the next quarter.
Yeah, but we can keep that. And yeah, this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Hope our listeners did too. Let us know what you thought. And yeah, thanks, Ebbe.
Thanks, Sebastian.
Bye.